Conversation with Kabelo Lehloenya. Her name first made headlines in the country when the Gauteng Health Department was embroiled in a PPE scandal, and she is the former Chief Financial Officer of that department. Now, she is joining us for a conversation today, and I first want us to start off with the fact that you've asked us to not conceal your identity, but to protect your identity. Why did you ask us to do that?
Thank you, Ziyanda. I think it is quite clear to everybody that knows about the story, about the recent murder of Babita Deokaran, right? So obviously, I also have security concerns, and that is the reason that I requested that perhaps, we don't conceal my identity, but for safety reasons, let's just you can just do a profile of me, profile my face, but obviously I need to be to protect my identity.
When we look at the position you've previously held as CFO within the Gauteng Health Department and what is currently taking place in terms of the charges lodged against you by the SIU, for those who don't have the context, why would you be so concerned? I mean, you've mentioned Babita Deokaran, and her recent murder. Why did you think it was so important to speak out?
So, the reason that I decided to speak up now, one, it's because I'm just tired of a lot of misinformation that is out there in the public, and I felt it necessary that it is important for the truth to come out, at least from the truth of what I know, because I was there, okay? And I also feel that there is a lot of information that I've put out in legal papers, but there are people that it is quite clear to me that they do not want that information to come out. And it just so happened as well that the media has not been picking up on the information that I've put out there. So when this invitation came, I thought it's really time for me to speak up.
Let's start at the beginning then, shall we? You are the CFO at Gauteng Health Department. The year is 2020. The country is hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. You are the Chief Financial Officer within that department. Take us through what happened. There was a war room that was established, right?
I started in the Gauteng Department of Health in 2018. I was quite excited. I was from the private sector, and I was quite excited to join public service. The department itself, if for anybody that is familiar with Gauteng provincial government affairs, they will know that the Department of Health at just after Life Esidimeni was at a point where it had almost collapsed, right? So when I joined in 2018, it was on the ticket of accountability, establishing good governance, cleaning up, and professionalizing the public service, okay? There were challenges. I mean, the financial systems had completely collapsed at the time that I joined. The supply chain management systems were completely broken when I joined, okay? So, but I also have to mention, I mean, it will be amiss of me not to mention the fact that the environment in the department and the culture in the department was also then quite toxic, coming out of the tragedy of Life Esidimeni.
Toxic in what sense?
Toxic in a sense that you had a lot of cliques, right? So my experience is that as a professional, you could not apply your mind independently. You could not take decisions based on information that is in front of you, but rather you then had to side with one or many cliques.
Let's be very clear and clarify this. When you say cliques, because I don't want it to be misinterpreted, okay. When you say cliques, are you referring to networks that existed within the Gauteng Health Department? that may have also been part and parcel of the breakdown of systems, such as the supply chain management one that you've just mentioned was actually in tatters when you joined that department?
Definitely. The SCM processes were in tatters when I joined, and indeed I am referring to just the networks that were there, right? They were quite entrenched in the system, right? At some point in retrospect and in hindsight, I've realized that at some point when systems are broken, we tend to blame individuals. When the individuals are just responding to the systems that they're operating in. We got consultants just before I left to come and assist us, specifically to fix the supply chain management systems, okay? And one recommendation that that they made, or something that they told me, was just to say, what you have here, okay, is you have a donkey, but you want it to run like a horse. And that is a problem, okay? So the reason that I'm explaining all of this, Ziyanda, is to come to a point of saying, when COVID-19 hit us, which was in March last year, already the department was in a disaster of its own. Okay? It was already in a disaster of its own. So and I think it is also commonly known, okay, that as a country, we were also not ready for COVID-19. So you can then just imagine how unready the department was.
So when the pandemic hits then, what processes are put in place, despite, what you've just mentioned? Of course, that is the context within which you say the pandemic hit. But at the time, and in particular, when we look at the allegations that are lodged against you, you are the CFO, the SIU was saying that you acted in an improper manner, that you failed to exercise your duties in an appropriate manner as the CFO, and in so doing, you signed contracts that actually caused a loss of 42.8 million rand.
What is interesting, Ziyanda, is that I actually left the department, the Gauteng Department of Health, in May 2020. That was merely 2 months after the hard lockdown was instituted in the country. And at that point in time, only for Lehla, for example, only 2.1 million had been paid to Lehla when I left.
Had you signed off on the Lehla contract for 2.1 million?
The contract, I had signed off on the contract, and the contract was of a higher value than that. But obviously, you do not pay for a contract, okay? You pay for what has been delivered. Every transaction has got, a complete transaction, has got 3 pillars, okay? You have one pillar of supply chain, where things emanate from. You have a pillar of inventory management, where they receive stock. You have a pillar of payment, right? Which is where, the payments people are. And as such, the first concern that in the first meeting that I had with my finance team, the first concern that they raised was of their safety.
So tell me then, this contract, the Lehla contract, was it an open-ended contract?
Not at all. There is no way that anybody can sign an open-ended contract. I must say that there were such contracts in the department that were termed as evergreen contracts by the AG. Obviously, I tried, despite my best efforts, right, to end those contracts. Some were, I wasn't able to terminate those contracts. But coming into the Lehla issue, okay, I was saying to you, the reason that I decided to speak up, it is because a lot of misinformation has been fed into, for example, you would be made to believe that I authorized payments to Lehla to the value of 46 million, because that is what Lehla was paid, ultimately, right? When Lehla was paid 38.8 million in August, I had long left the department. I was serving my notice, right?
Yes.
And before perhaps you ask a follow-up question, let me just state this, right? That the reason that we are where we are, and we all have heightened safety concerns, right? And I can assure you that staff at the department also, they're quite scared. Okay, it is because it does not matter what supply chain has done. It does not matter what the inventory receiving department has done. When, as a finance department, you get documentation to sign on, to approve payment for a service provider, as a professional, you have a duty to satisfy yourself that you are paying an invoice of a service provider that was appointed appropriately, that we are paying an invoice of a service provider that has delivered goods that were required by the department.
I have to jump in there.
What I have heard,
yes.
Can I just finish this point?
Yeah.
Is that obviously it is said that Babita, okay, did not agree on paying to pay irregularly appointed service providers. Okay, that is exactly what accounts payables department is there to do. For example, there is no way, even if as a CFO, you can enter into a contract to buy Louis Vuitton bags. Okay, there is no way that finance people will pay that invoice simply because they have a duty to scrutinize invoices and say, is this what is required? Is the service required by the department? Do our patients use Louis Vuitton bags?
Yeah.
And they have a right to say, no, we can't pay that invoice.
A very critical point about part of the role being about ensuring that the contracts that were entered into were lawful. And this seems to be also what the SIU was saying about you, that you failed to actually ensure that the contracts that was entered into with Lehla, for an example, that it was actually lawfully entered into.
Ziyanda, having entered into a contract with a particular service provider, it is neither here nor there.
Why?
Because if the department is of the view that there was some wrongdoing in the signing of a particular contract, the accounting officer has full rights in terms of the PFMA to stop payments to such contracts. You would remember very well that around June, July, the Premier of the province announced publicly that the Department of Health is a crime scene. As such, service providers will not be paid up until SIU investigations had been completed and service providers had been cleared.
Yes.
That the payment of service providers, regardless of whatever contracts that have been entered into, okay, is within the CFO and the HOD can decide on whether to pay a service provider or not. That is what also has been spewed into the public space, that because this person signed this contract, therefore this person is responsible. No, it is not so. The delegations in the public service are very clear. When you are a CFO, when you are the HOD, you are responsible for the decisions that you make today. You can't say, unless somebody says to me, the department was on autopilot. If the department was on autopilot and there was no management, then you can blame me for those payments.
Were things not different during the COVID-19 pandemic? Because at some stage, even when it came to payments, things were centralized. There was a war room that was set up, isn't it?
Ziyanda, one thing that I would like to make clear, okay, is that one, there was never one person that made decisions. All right? I have explained to you that we had a system that was in tatters when COVID-19 started, right? And obviously an emergency situation happened, which is COVID-19, okay? And that then allowed for emergency deviations, all right? There is a process indeed that is followed.
When you have deviations.
When you deviate.
Yes.
And that is why it's important.
Doesn't mean that it's just, you know, a free-for-all.
And that is why it is important to have ethical professionals in the public service, right? Because ultimately, somebody has got to sign on a particular document.
Yes.
But as perhaps the people, the government that employs, what do you call them? Officials.
Yes.
Okay, public sector officials. They need to ensure that those people, the decisions that they will take at any given point in time, are the decisions that are in the best interest of the state and of the citizens. Okay? So what I'm saying to you is that there were delegations and things had to be, it was not business as usual. COVID-19 presented us with business unusual situation, and we had to do things quite quickly. Processes.
Which meant what? For your processes?
I'm coming there. Which meant deviations, obviously, okay? Which also then meant that because we had this pandemic, right? And remember, because of the pandemic, we had to report, correctly so, to the National Department of Health, because they needed to know how much PPE we have in the province. Okay, we had to report to the provincial government.
Yeah.
Correctly so,
yes.
Because they also needed to know how much PPE we had, right? So that ultimately you don't have hospitals that are not functional because there is no PPE. All right. So that in itself then meant that at some point we had to centralize.
Yes.
Okay.
Are you saying that even the products that you got from the one that you say, that the 2.1 million that you paid for, it was all above board, and from your understanding, the quality even of the product that they delivered was up to scratch?
The quality that they delivered was definitely up to scratch. Okay, they delivered sanitizers, and remember at that point in time, this is in April, early April, okay, 2020. We were running short globally of hand sanitizers that had, those gun sprays. Yes. We were running short of it. In the department, we wrote a circular, and this circular was saying hospitals must preserve, they must not discard the empty sanitizer bottles because there just wasn't enough. And that is what they provided. And they provided biohazard bags. And those were urgently required.
Were you at any point called by a politician to say, this is the supplier that we need you to process a payment for, ever?
No, I wasn't.
Not the former health MEC, Bandilelemasoku?
Strangely enough, something else that people do not know is that I did not have a close relationship with the MEC. Actually, I think in my tenure, in the Department of Health, the MEC might have called me once or twice, not more than that. So we do not have a close relationship. The point that I'm trying to get to is that there was nothing untoward about Lehla, so far as I know. Okay? That the invoices, it's two invoices that I signed for 2.1 million. Okay? Those invoices were backed by delivery notes, which were signed by an independent party, which was a warehouse manager.
When you made a payment for 2.1 million rand to Lehla Developments, one, did you know who Thandi Sizwe was? Did you have a relationship with him, friendship or any kind? But also, were you ever instructed by someone like Bandilelemasoku to make that payment to that particular entity because of their relationship as family friends?
Okay, not at all, Ziyanda, not at all. And I think the issue of MEC Masuku being charged for lack of oversight, for not reading one email, for me, it really was very unfortunate. Anybody that understands our environment will tell you that we receive literally hundreds of emails per day. Ask anybody in the Department of Health. And that is why we have a lot of the executives, we give our personal assistants. I even had given a manager in my office access to my email address, to my emails, so that they can go through my emails and check what was important. So
why do you think then the former MEC had that fate befall him?
I would not like to speculate. I would not like to speculate, really. I will not go into that realm of speculation.
I'll tell you why.
What I'm saying is that, for me, really, I do believe, honestly speaking, that Dr. Bandilelemasoku is one of, well, he's not very young because he's not under 35, but I think there is a lot that the department, was going to gain out of him. And there is a lot as well that the government can still get out of him. He is very hardworking, right? The limited interactions that I had with him, right? What I came across was somebody that was very honest, that was very open and honest, right? I never came across somebody that was a typical politician that was interested in contracts and all of that. To me, he really wasn't. He did not appear that way. And he definitely did nothing to, for me to even think that that's the kind of a person that he was.
Perhaps not for you to speculate, but because you're sitting here with me today, and it would seem that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you also feel as though you are being wronged, or you are being wrongfully accused, or you are being made a scapegoat for things that ultimately would have been decisions that are made by a collective. Am I correct?
I definitely am being wronged. That is without any doubt. That I'm being used as a scapegoat is also without any doubt. And that is why I have decided that it's important for me to speak my truth, to put what I know out there, so that then people can make informed decisions.
What do you think is at the root of the accusations that are leveled against you in relation to the kind of environment within the Gauteng Health Department, or perhaps the politics that we may not be privy to?
Ziyanda, can you please just hold on to that question, because I have not responded. I have not responded to your previous question, which was to say, right, it had something to do with, was there pressure for me to pay the 2.1 million to Lehla, okay? And I was saying to you, what people would be made to believe, okay, it is that there were some special, there was some favor done for Lehla. It is not true. Do I know Mr. Diko? I wanted to ask you, I know that you are asking me questions, okay? But again, I wanted yourself to put yourself in March 2020, April 2020. Did you know, or do you think that a man on the streets knew who Thandisizwe Diko was at that time? I am an accountant. I don't have an Instagram account. I don't have a Facebook account. So whatever trends on those platforms, I would not know about them. And I just find also the insinuation that officials are somehow expected to know who the friends of their political bosses are, of their political principals are, is very unfair. It is extremely unfair. I can bet my bottom dollar that if you go to the department now, the senior management, some managers do not even know if MEC Mokgethi is married or not. Right? let alone knowing who the friends of her spouse or her life partner are. So this expectation that, one should have known that Thandisizwe Diko somehow had a relationship, if the relationship was not disclosed, there is no way that one would have known, okay? But I must also put it on record, okay, that there was never anything wrong in doing business with Mr. Diko. Mr. Diko was not blacklisted in any of the, of the government databases. So there was nothing wrong in doing business with Mr. Diko.
The SIU's gotten it wrong.
And they know it.
Why do you think the SIU
think
would get it wrong? Because to me, it sounds as though there has been a narrative formed against you, and you are saying the SIU has also contributed, if not led, that narrative. And then it goes back to my earlier question. Why you? Why do you think you're being scapegoated? Who are the people who would want to scapegoat you, and what are their interests?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let me respond in this way, that the SIU has gotten this. One, I support very much the work that the SIU does, okay? One of, amongst many mandates or objectives of the SIU, it is to combat corruption, okay? And in the fight against corruption, I am an ally. I am not opposed to the fight against corruption. That is the reason why it is that I joined public service in the first place, okay? And how the SIU could get this so wrong, I've got no idea, other than to say I think that the SIU was misled, okay? And
deliberately or inadvertently?
It must have been deliberately, because if it was not deliberately, okay, the people that are responsible for that payment, you'd be knowing their names.
The people who are responsible for that payment were in which departments?
The people that are responsible for the 39 million that was paid to Lila on the 3rd of August, after there was all of this noise, okay? After, by the way, the Premier had said no payments are going to be made to service providers. But those officials went ahead and they made those payments.
Many might say you're just here to come and clear your name, perhaps because you're an accountant, you can't even get a job, and so you're here to come and defend yourself and your honor because, you don't want to go down alone.
You see, that, I must say, that tickled me a little bit. With a third-party notice, a lot of, the reporting was that I do not want to go down alone. And it's not true. It is not true. What I am merely doing is to say, here is the truth. Right? And let us deal with the truth. If you think about it, okay? There is a trial that is supposed to take place for the recovery of the funds that have allegedly been lost to the state.
Yes.
And yet, the people that caused that loss are not in the trial. Do you think that is a good use of the state resources?
I mean, ultimately, your argument is that a lot of the payments were done after you'd left. But the question is, why did you leave the Gauteng Health Department when you did? It would seem, and it's been said, that you left because you were running away from a disciplinary hearing and you knew what was going to come.
I don't think that I can be able to hide in this country, really, okay? I I did not run away from the department. I left the department because at that point in time, it had just been very toxic. It was very toxic, right? It had been toxic anyways. But at that point in time, and for me, obviously I've thought a lot about this to say, but what could have led to this level of toxicity, more especially during the COVID time?
What was toxic during the COVID time? You've explained when you arrived, but during the COVID time, which part was toxic? Was it the pressure? Was it the people trying to influence you? Was it the demands that were placed on you unduly so? Which part is toxic? Is it the networks? Networks, corrupt networks that are disrupting you? Are your wings clipped in your ability to do your job?
It is all of the above. All that you have said, right? The pressure was too much on everybody, but it was made to be unbearable for me. And obviously the networks that have been there for a very long time, by the way, right? And the centralizing also of the procurement, people did not like that. And that is demonstrated by the fact that as soon as I left, the procurement stuff was changed. One thing that amazed me during the COVID time, I had a very difficult time. It was tough. Myself and my staff, we were attacked almost on a daily basis. I even reported this, by the way, to the accounting officer. One day when I arrived at the war room, I had a procurement manager that I had borrowed from one of the national departments to come and assist. When I got into the war room, she came to me and she said, CFO, I am never going to report anything in the war room, because she was attacked to no end.
For what?
Many things. So in an environment, right, that was broken, like the environment that we're working in, there will be quite a number of systemic challenges, right, that cannot be resolved by one person or by one action, but that required the changing of the entire system.
This then goes back to the issue of the networks, and it's important to understand this toxicity, because it's also this toxicity that may perhaps also help the public understand why someone like Babita Deogran was shot, why you're sitting here today. Am I understanding you correctly that there are corrupt networks that exist within the Gauteng Health Department and may very well possibly have may be proxies of people who are in the upper echelons of society, or may even be politicians, who have people within the Gauteng Health Department doing their bidding, and ultimately when things get exposed, people like yourself become the scapegoat?
I will not speculate, and I will not accuse people, right, of something that I have not necessarily, that has not necessarily been proven. But I can tell you that the networks in the department are quite entrenched.
Corrupt networks, or let's qualify this. We don't want to leave any question marks. These networks, to your understanding.
You see, here's the thing.
What do they do?
When you are a professional in public service, you are new. You get there, you are very excited about this responsibility that you have been given. Okay? You start changing things. In the process, you do not understand that you're upsetting people, right? And you might as well be upsetting very high-level people who indeed have proxies at a very, junior level. One thing that I discovered when I was in the department was that there are some initiatives, improvement initiatives, that I was implementing. And it was junior people that blocked those. Only later did I learn that outside of the department, you have people are relatives, people are friends, and people will go to the extent of not even greeting each other in front of you, right? But, and you'll get the impression that they do not know each other, yet they know each other very well. That is the extent of the toxicity that I'm talking about.
You seem to be very, I don't know if hesitant is the word, to use the word corruption. Is there a reason for that?
I am indeed cautious about that.
Why?
Okay. If something has not been proven, you really can't then accuse people of what has not been proven.
As you sit here, is there anyone that you are protecting?
I'm not protecting anyone. I've got no reason to protect any person. Okay? But what I'm saying is that what I am saying is inconvenient for the powerful, which is why I have been made a scapegoat. Remember that, as I'm saying, that this whole PPE corruption thing has been made to be the fault of one person. And anybody that knows anything about government systems will tell you that it is impossible. And as I say to you, that when I left the department, only about 300 million had been paid. And that was reported on. Fast forward, in August, about 1.9 billion had been paid. What happened? Who was responsible, okay, for increasing the expenditure? After I had left, if people, as they are saying, that there was suspected wrongdoing. So I'm saying if there was any suspected wrongdoing on my part, why did they continue to pay all these contracts?
The uncomfortable truths, as you say, that may be disrupting or the powerful. As you sit here today, are you fearing for your safety?
One thing about me that was said was that, you know, I'm controlling. I don't know how you would say that, but people were complaining that, you know, I cannot be controlled. And that was a problem, right? And the aggression that I have suffered post my resigning from the department, obviously when all of this, you know, came out, I cannot believe. Why me? I can't tell you.
Have you applied your mind as to who these powerful could be and how you may have been inconveniencing them?
Because it is exposing that some powerful people are actually not telling the truth. That is what it's doing. It is exposing that people are about PR and not about the truth.
What would you like to see happen as justice for you as Kabelo Lehloenya?
You asked me a question about my safety, okay? You said, do I feel safe? Did you ask me that? I think you did.
I did.
All right. You know what? I will not allow myself to live in fear. But again, it's important to acknowledge what is happening around me and what has happened. I do believe, and I think I've got reason enough to believe that somebody would indeed benefit from harming me, because that is the truth. There is a truth that people just don't want to be told.
I think on that note, I'd like to leave it there. Thank you so much, Kabelo Lehloenya, for speaking to me, for sharing your truth. And of course, the legal processes are still going to continue. We'll be hearing more of Ms. Kabelo Lehloenya, although through the courts, and she maintains her innocence, that she is a scapegoat in the PPE scandal that broke out in July 2020.
Thank you, Ziyanda, for the time.